All right, folks, this one is the Active Seam Infuse. We're gonna be using 3 threads on this machine. This diagram is always gonna be up on the wall, but this machine has 1 looper thread that goes down and under, 1 inside needle, it's gonna go like this, and an outside needle that's basically gonna follow the same trajectory as the inside needle once it gets past tension discs. So, first things first, I'm gonna open up the machine. You can open up this little flap. There's a door that opens like here. And then there's a little lever that allows you to open up the presser foot. What you'll see inside this machine is that there's 2 needles working and then a looper. So we're just going to break that chain just like you would on a serger to change the thread color so that you guys can see how the threads are going to be moving through the machine. Okay, let's do the hardest part, which is the looper thread first. So the looper thread is going to be the thread that goes to the far right spool here. Let me just pull it a little. I'm going to use some tweezers and a threader for this machine. So as I'm pulling it down, you'll see the neon thread coming up through the top, down through this guide and that guide. It's going to come around the tension disc. You may need to help it out a little bit. And it's going to come down the front through these little thread guides. That's a little bit funky right there. Okay. All right. Now, this is where you're going to need to use your threader. These threaders are just tiny little wires that have an opening that are really long and thin. You can buy these in the beading section of the craft store, or you can use something like a permanent retainer threader that are made out of plastic. Those are nice to have handy. We should have a few of these floating around, but they get lost pretty easily. So we're going to put our thread tail through there so that we can guide this through the machine very easily. So once we get down to this thread guide, we're going to kind of go under this plate and then up through this guide with the threader. If it gets hooked on there, that's fine, but it really doesn't need to be hooked. Okay. Now, the tricky part is that we have to push this through a tiny little hole that goes right under the thread plate and then through the looper. So, come around to this side. I'll show you what that looks like. So, if you move the looper a little bit like this, you'll see that lever moving. There's a hole in there, right here, and we want this looper to pass through, but it needs to come through this channel first. So we're going to push it from the front to the back until we see it come out. And then we're going to adjust this until we see it pass through that looper. You see that? Once you see the threader come through there, you can grab it with your tweezers. And it should gently pull all the way through and out. It's pretty tight, so just know that it might be a little hard to pull it, but you should see that thread moving all the way through that channel. Okay, now while we're over here, we're gonna now do the inside needle and leaving the outside needle on its own for a moment. So I'm just gonna figure out which one is the inside and which one is the outside. So this is the inside needle, and I'm just going to gently pull this thread. I'm going to pull it down until we can start seeing this orange thread coming through. All right, so on the inside needle, we're going to thread it back to front here, around the tension disc. It's going to go through the front, and then these two kind of follow the same path all the way down to the needles. These are very easy to thread. Pretty easy to thread. All the way down to the needle. And I'm just going to take both of these threads out so that you guys can see how the needles should be threaded. Okay. So we're going to thread the inside needle going front to back. If you're really good at this, you can do it, you know, just by eyesight, but I'm going to use the threader just because this middle wire is a little bit thicker, and it just helps me guide the needle through a bit easier. And I say that. Okay, thread it through. And then I'm going to use my tweezers to help me get it all the way through and out the back. Okay, great. Now we're going to thread the outside needle. This one's pink. So it's going to come through and around the tension disc, and it's going to follow the same path as the orange one. All these old threads, and instead of going to the inside, it's just going to go to the outside. These needle eyes are very, very small on this machine, so using a threader helps. Okay, just get the threader through there and then grab it with the tweezers so that I can get my fingers on it. And then I just pull it through. Okay, so we should have two threads up here and one coming down here. So I'm going to close up on my parts, close this plate, and that's fine if this one's coming from underneath, no worries. And then this guy is going to lock down like that, and we're going to test it. So one interesting thing about this machine is you always need to be using two pieces of fabric, because essentially this machine butts the two fabrics together and creates a flat seam, basically like a zigzag, something like you would see on the outside of a pair of leggings or something. So this one works really well with knit fabrics, but we're just going to do it on muslin for visualization's sake. But this one's really great for active sportswear, hence the name Active Seam. So even though we're using two fabrics, it always needs to be face to face like this. I'm gonna lift my presser foot with my pedal, put my fabric underneath the needles. And if you want to start it out and make sure that things are working, you can kind of give it a few manual passes. You get a nice chain like that. And what you're going to notice is it's going to look like a really loose stitch, which is fine because it's not intended to just sit like this. The active seam is intended to pull apart like this and create a nice flat seam like this on the inside of a pair of leggings or something knit, or on the outside of something that needs to be butted together or felled.